Hi, I'm Roxy. I've just released a set of brushes for Corel Painter called Roxy's Metallic Brushes, and this is the demo video where I'll show you how to use them. I should also mention that they're free to grab if you get them within 1 month of the launch of this video. I'll start with installation instructions and how to set pressure sensitivity. But I have timestamped the video, so feel free to skip ahead if you just want to get to the brush functionality. So firstly, how to get it. I've put links in the description to both Gumroad and CubeBrush, so you can use whichever store you prefer. As mentioned in the intro, it's free for 1 month from now, so just put a 0 in the price field. If you want to put a higher number there, hey, I'm not going to say no, but 0 is fine. So just click to get it, and then you can download the zip file. You need to unzip the file somewhere on your PC or Mac, and you'll end up with an installation and copyright text file, a preview, a quick preview of all the brushes, and 2 folders. In the brushes folder, we've got Roxy Metallic and Roxy Metallic Legacy. Roxy Metallic is the file for, at present, the latest Corel Painter, which is version 2023. And Roxy Metallic Legacy I have tested on Corel Painter 19 up until 22, and the brushes work just fine. It might work on older versions, but obviously I don't have every version of Corel Painter, so feedback is appreciated. And of course the 23 version may be forwards compatible, but we don't know that yet. Then in the other folder we've got the palette file, and I've tested that on Corel 19 to 23, and it works on all of those, and it probably will work on older versions as well, and very likely forwards compatible. So to install, we'll start with the brushes. Head on over to Brushes, Import, Category, navigate to where you unzip the files, head on over to the brush folder, and then import the file that corresponds to your version of Corel Painter. Click Open, and it'll appear probably at the bottom there. Then for the color set libraries, first you'll want to open this panel. For that, head on over to Window, Color Panels, Color Sets. Once you've got this open, click on this hamburger menu, import color set, and then again you want to head over to where you unzip the files, head on over to the palette, click this, and then open. There's a good reason why I've included a palette file with this brush set, and I'll show you exactly why when I demo the brushes later in the video. But before we get into the demo, there's just one more thing I want to talk about, and that is how to configure your pressure sensitivity. Now these brushes are pressure sensitive, which means that if you press lightly, you'll just get a whisper of that color coming through, and if you press hard, you'll get the full color. Now of course I'm assuming that you have a tablet. You don't have pressure sensitivity if you have a mouse. If you're thinking of getting a tablet, I will put a link to the exact tablet that I'm using, a Huion Inspire 1060p. I'll link that in the description. It's a very affordable tablet, and also Black Friday is coming, so keep an eye on the price and you might get a great deal. But proceeding as if you have a tablet, if you're finding that the brush strokes of a particular brush are all consistently too bold or consistently too faint for you, then you probably want to just calibrate the pressure sensitivity so that it's right for you. And this is very simple to do. You just have to go to the brush calibration panel. You can find that by Window, Brush Control Panels, Brush Calibration. And once you're on that screen, you'll see this little hamburger menu down here. So you want to start your stroke off as soft as you typically would press, and then end it as hard as you typically would press. So something like that. And what it'll do is it'll auto fill in these numbers. Some of it is for pen pressure and some of it is for velocity, which is why they talk about speed. But you don't have to worry about that in this instance because none of my brushes use velocity. they all use pressure. So don't worry about going slow to fast. Just make sure that your stroke is from soft to hard, and then it'll work out the pressure scale for you. So let's get into the demos. I just want to quickly increase the canvas size so we've got a bit of space to work with. So all these brushes are impasto brushes, which means it gives the appearance of thick paint. And the first brush I'll show you is called Metal Builder 1. That's the brush that I used mainly to build up 7 of 9's face implant here. If you don't know who 7 of 9 is, shame on you. Go watch Star Trek Voyager. And if there's any Trekkies watching, let me know in the comments who's your favorite captain and why. But back to the brushes. So the way it works is the harder you press, the more color comes through. And let me just zoom in so you can see nicely. The more you go over an area, it just kind of builds up the depth. It just gets higher and higher, like you're stacking paint. And as I mentioned, that was the main brush that I used to build up most of this implant here. If you keep going excessively over the same spot, it's going to take a little while, but eventually, there we go, you see that? It's reaching the maximum height of impasto brushes. So if you see that, then you know it's kind of gone a little bit too high. And, or maybe you like that, I don't know. But I'll show you how to get rid of that in a moment. The other thing I just want to quickly also mention, if you are working directly on a canvas, it's probably going to look a little bit not as strong because it's picking up the white of the canvas. These are impasto brushes, so they kind of give that wet look. So whatever's underneath, it's going to try and pick up a little bit of that. And so if you don't want that to happen, just make sure that you are on a new layer. So that's the first brush. The second and third brush, it's the same functionality, but it's a little bit smoother. The second one is a bit less grainy, you can see that. And the third one is the smoothest of all three. Now we've got the removers. So where the first three we were building up paint, these three removes paint. Now you see, if I go over the spot, we can actually kind of get rid of that. So again, this is the most kind of grainy version of the removers, and then we've got like a smoother version and the smoothest version. So these kind of indent, whereas the first three raise. Then I've got 3 leveling brushes. This first one has a sharp edge to it. So if we kind of go over the same spot, it just kind of tries to even things out. You see that? Everything's sort of coming to the same depth level. But it's got a sharp edge, so you see these kind of lines, which is why I also made the soft lever, and makes things a little bit easier to blend. Makes things smoother. And then we've got the complete opposite, which is a grainy leveler, and that kind of, it also levels things out, but it leaves kind of a grainy texture. Then after the grainy leveler, we've got the smudger. Now the smudger is kind of a way to make things smoother as well, but it also moves the paint, whereas the levelers only affected depth. This you can actually kind of smudge the paint around a little bit as well. Was that on? Oh, there we go. That was on the other layer. So that's the smudger. And then I've got 3 different erasers. Again, I've got a sharp eraser. So it's got kind of a sharp edge. That's nice for just kind of shaping something, especially from the outside, making it a little bit sharper. And then I have got a soft version. So also erases paint and depth, but just does a little bit more of a subtle job of it. And then I've got the grainy eraser, which, as you can see, leaves a little bit of a grainy texture behind. You can actually get rid of this grainy texture if you just keep going over the same spot, but you might like the grainy residue that it leaves behind. Then we've got Metal Writer. Let me just clear the canvas a little bit here. So Metal Writer was the first brush that I designed out of the whole pack, and its purpose is really just I was trying to make something that would create gold text, freehand text. You know, when you write something, it's raised and it looks gold. So you could use it to create cards or whatever. And what's special about this brush is it has a little bit of color variability and value variability. And what that means is that each stroke is going to be slightly, ever so slightly different. Some will be slightly more red, some will be slightly more gold, and some are a little bit lighter, some are a bit darker, and this helps it create, sorry about the pixelation, I zoomed in a bit too far there. This helps create that kind of metallic look, the shimmering quality. So in the palette I've got the gold, which I've just used, and I've got some basic metals, bronze and like a lighter color bronze, a dark bronze, a light gold, a gold, like a copper, like should actually be there, but anyway, I'll re-export that. But so we got the bronzes, we've got the golds, and then we've got the coppers. Like for example, this is kind of your mid-range copper, and then you want to put some dark bits and some highlights, so you can make some nice metal textures. And then we've got over here, this is the silver and iron, and like a really dark metal comes in handy. Cobalt, magma, and patina, that's the green stuff you get on copper when it gets old. Quartz, and these last four are actually associated with specific brushes, which I'll show you. But before I continue, I also just want to mention, in terms of these being impasto brushes, this is a technology that belongs to Corel Painter. So if you want the impasto aspect of it to be editable, meaning, let me just get a thicker brush here, or I could just increase this so we can see what's going on. You see, we've got this brush that's building up, and then let's say we grab another color and start kind of smearing these in together. They work together. It's the impasto effect that's happening here. If you save this as a RIF file, which is the native Corel Painter file format, then you will be able to just keep working on this impasto. However, if you save it as a PSD file, close it and then reopen it, what will happen is this impasto, you'll see it, but it will be kind of rasterized, for lack of a better word. So although you'll see it, you won't be able to interact with it in the same way that we're able to smudge things around. You'll actually just be creating a new layer of impasto over what was impasto. So that's just something to keep in mind. So back to the brush. This Metal Writer brush is actually the one that I used in the thumbnail. You may recall I had something like this going on, and then all I did was I took a lighter color, made the brush a little smaller, and added some extra highlights for juiciness. You can also go and grab like a darker metal and kind of work on it a little more. So I love this brush, very excited about it. And the next two are very similar. This one I call Iridescent Writer. I mentioned that these last four have something to do with specific brushes. This iridescent brush, if you click this blue one here, that's just the right color to start with, and you start to get quite an aggressive hue shift, not like the previous Metal Writer, and it just looks iridescent. Real fun to use. Similarly, the next one, Pearlescent Writer, click the pink one here. It is actually labeled, if you hover over, you see it's pearlescent iridescent. So the pearlescent one, it's designed for a light color palette. You'll see that's really light over there, and it gives like a pearlescent look. And as you can see, when I went through there, it started picking up other colors, because these brushes are, I guess you could say, dirty brushes. They interact with what's on the canvas. That's why if you want to get their full glory, you probably want to use it on a new layer. Okay, the next brush is Metal Slab. And let me just choose a different color. Actually, yeah, that. So Metal Slab is very gritty, and it goes almost immediately to the maximum height of impasto. So you can create big slabs of metal. And then the one after that, Metal Engrave, is kind of like also very gritty, but it cuts into the metal. By the way, with this, I didn't actually use the engrave. I just used one of the metal removers at a smaller size to create these indents, but I could have used the engrave. It's just a little bit grittier than what I wanted. In this one, brush metal, it's kind of like the slab, but it builds up a little bit more gradually. You can see that, not at maximum height just yet. And it's also got value variability and a slight bit of hue variability, so each stroke will be slightly different. Rust is another one of those brushes that are linked to the palette specifically, is the rust color. And you can see this is a spray brush, so kind of just get some mottled, rusty looking texture going on there. You see this one is the maximum impasto, so this is actually spraying underneath because it's not as high. Of course, you don't have to use it as rust. You could literally pick any color, but if you want to get that rust color, here it is on the palette. Okay, these next three brushes, they create kind of a sandpapery shimmer. See that? This is the small version, and then we've got the medium version and kind of a large blobby version. I actually used this brush, actually I think it was the small one. I used this brush to create a sand texture on this pick. It was quite subtle, but it turned out so nice. At least I think so. Here I am blowing my own trumpet about my own art. But it's a fun brush to use, and you can make really nice backgrounds with it. Just kind of pick a bunch of different colors and creates a beautiful little shimmery background. Now again, remember this is impasto. So let's say you created that and then you want to, I don't know, use the pearlescent writer on top to create something. You'll see that it's actually picking up all the little dots from the texture below, which isn't necessarily ideal. So what you have to do, if you want to use this as a background that isn't going to affect other things, is save it as a PSD like I mentioned earlier. Close it, reopen it, and then actually let me do that and I'll show you. We're going to save this as Photoshop file instead of a RIF. Save, close it, reopen. So now we've got a PSD file. And now here's where we were working with that shimmer. Now if I take the pearlescent, you'll see it's not picking up the grain, it's actually painting over it. It's not, because I'm painting on the bloody canvas. Hang on. Here we go, layer 2. There we go. Now you can see what I meant earlier when I said it kind of rasterizes the impasto effect so that it's no longer editable, but it's still there. You can paint on top of it, so that's a strategy. Next we've got metal scratches. Now this kind of, it bites into the canvas, but in a very erratic way, so it looks like scratches. If you kind of just drag the brush, you can create directional scratches, but if you just hold it in place or shimmer it around, it creates like a halo. But you can also just go crazy with it and make a nice little scratchy texture. Now something else I need to point out, which I've observed, is if I save this now as a PSD, well it is already a PSD, so I'm going to save it, close it, reopen it, And where's our scratches gone? Now what's happened is that because the scratches brush doesn't apply any paint to it, the PSD file doesn't recognize that there is anything there, and it just kind of gets rid of it. I'll show you something else. Let's just grab this and put some paint down on the canvas. Then we get our metal scratches brush and we're going to do this. You can see I'm going over this paint, and this, we're still on a a transparent layer, so this white isn't really there. So if I save this, close it, reopen it, now you can see the scratches appear on where the paint was, but not over where the transparent pixels were. So that's just something to keep in mind if you're going to use the scratches brush and you don't want to save the file as a RIF file. If you want to save it as a Photoshop file, for example, then you just need to use the scratches on a layer that has some paint on. Otherwise, it's just going to disappear. And then there's going to be wailing and gnashing of teeth. And we don't want that. And next brush, it's kind of a novelty one. I call it Asteroid. It uses, I've linked it to this kind of purplish color because I feel that looks really spacey. I don't know when you would have opportunity to use this, but it looks cool and kind of fitted with the theme. So there you go. And of course you don't have to use that color. You can use any color you like. But if you want the asteroid color, here it is in the palette. What do we got next? Okay, next we've got a whole bunch of chains. Now, these chains I actually created for a painting that I was working on. I wanted something that would make it easier to draw the chains, the chain jewelry on her back. And I designed a bunch of different chains because I wasn't sure what would look good. And so these brushes are the results of that. Something else you could, I guess, do with these chain, like let's say you've drawn a chain, but you need to have it in perspective. You can transform it and press distort. And there you go, you've got the base. You can paint over it so that it looks better, but there it is, you've got a chain in perspective, that easy. Then just for kicks, I made these two gear ones and a barbed wire. I figured I was on a roll, so I was like, hey, let's make all the metal things. Lastly, we have another novelty brush called Metal Shavings. Again, I don't know how useful this brush is. You may never use it. Feel free to prove me wrong. But it's there should you desire. So we've got some useful brushes and some novelty brushes. And even the novelty brushes are at least fun to play with. So that wraps up the demo. Download links are in the description, and my patrons can also find it in their Dropbox treasure trove. Add me on social media if you make anything with the brushes so I can like it. And thank you for watching. Much obliged if you leave a like and subscribe. Until the next one, God bless.